10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Coming to you live. It's an emergency live history made today. Coming to you live, though. It's Lichtman Live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
This is a momentous day, and the only way to properly analyze it is through the keys to the White House. Take all the punditry and all the polling and consign them to the flames. As the great philosopher David Hume said, you should do the works of superstition.
All right, Dad. Well, I don't have much of an intro. I think today speaks for itself. Why don't we go right into your analysis and your thoughts about what happened and what should happen next?
Remember, I thought the Democrats should stick with Biden because he ticks off two critical keys, the incumbency key and the internal party contest key, which means under my system, it's 6 keys, and you count out as a predicted loser the incumbent party. So 6 of the remaining 11 keys would have to fall to predict the defeat of the incumbent Democrats. Remember, this is a system of 13 keys, which are true-false questions that relate to the strength and performance of the White House party. In other words, unlike the pundits and the pollsters and the operatives, they tap into the structure of how elections really work as votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And the keys have been right since I predicted Ronald Reagan's re-election in April 1982, nearly 3 years ahead of time, during what was then the worst recession since the Great Depression, and when Reagan's approval ratings were at a historic low. And interestingly, 60% of Americans in a poll that year thought he was too old to run for re-election. So if we govern by the polls, Ronald Reagan should have dropped out, right? And instead, he won one of the biggest landslides in history, winning all but one state. So, for whatever reason, and I'm not an insider, I'm never going to speculate on why Joe Biden has retained the presidency and dropped out. I recommended, if he drops out, that he steps down from the presidency. So Harris becomes president. They retain the incumbency key, and she's likely the consensus nominee. So they retain the contest key and are back in the same position they were with Joe Biden on the ticket. But that's history. So he's out. They lose the incumbency key, but they still can retain the contest key. If the Democrats grow a spine and become smart, they will unite behind Harris as the consensus nominee, preserve the contest key, and forfeit only a single key. So that would put the Democrats down 3 keys right now. The mandate key, based upon midterm election results, the incumbent charisma key, because Harris is not an FDR, and of course, the incumbency key. There are 4 shaky keys on which I've not made a final call. I'm going to make my final prediction after the Democratic convention in August. But here are the keys to look for. Third party, social unrest, foreign/military failure and success. With the Democrats growing the spine and the brain and making Harris the consensus nominee, 3 of those keys would have to fall, of the 4 uncertain keys, to predict a Democratic defeat. They don't have a consensus nominee, they lose the contest key, and only 2 of those 4 remaining undecided keys would have to fall to predict the Democrats' defeat. But let's look outside the keys for a moment. Just look at the verdict of straight history. Since 1900, Sam, how many times has the White House party been reelected when it's an open seat with no incumbent running and an internal party contest?
0.
0. On the other hand, when there is an open seat, which we now have, but no internal party contest, the incumbent party it's a small sample, but the incumbent party has a decent chance of winning. Examples include Herbert Hoover in 1928 and George H.W. Bush in 1988. So the keys are clear and the verdict of history is clear. If the Democrats want to win this election, they need to retain the contest key, which would put them in a very good position to win. A lot would have to go wrong to defeat Harris as the consensus nominee. Now, a lot of people have said to me, but you've got to change your keys. They may be based on history, but this year is different. Never had a president step down this close to an election. Well, we do have something of an example. Do you know who was the last president to step down from re-election, Sam?
Nixon. No, LBJ.
LBJ in 1968. He stepped down in March, but then you had this huge party brawl. So you lost both keys. You had an explosion of social unrest throughout the term and then a Democratic convention. And the result was the election of whom, Sam? Who did the country get?
Nixon.
Nixon, who almost destroyed our democracy. Had the Supreme Court's immunity decision been in effect in the 1970s, Nixon would have got away scot-free with Watergate, and our democracy may have died 50 years ago. So the Johnson case is a very good example of how important it is not to lose that second key, the contest key. In effect, that would also recreate the same situation we had in 2016 of an open seat at a contest, which led to the election of Donald Trump in the first place. Now, the other point about this election being different, every 4 years, someone tells me, oh, this election is different. Got to change your keys. We have an African American running. No way the nation is ready to elect an African American. We have a woman running. No way the nation is ready to elect a woman. And she actually won the popular vote and came within a whisker of the Electoral College. We have social media. And now we hear this election is different. We have Biden stepping down. We have the near assassination attempt. And my answer is the keys are as constant as the Northern Star. To change a model on the fly is a sure recipe for error. Moreover, the keys are very robust. They go all the way back to 1860. The horse and buggy days in development. Women didn't vote. African Americans were enslaved. Your ancestors from Eastern Europe saying we're here yet. Latino, Asians were not here yet. We had no Poles, no wheels, no jet planes, no radio, no television. So the keys have endured through enormous changes in our communications, our society, our economics, our demography. Now, as I've said, and you've heard me say this before, I'm not psychic Gene Dixon with a crystal ball. I'm not Speaker Mike Johnson, if you heard him at the convention, thinks the Almighty talks to him and tells us what policies we should adopt. The keys are based on history, and it's always possible. Events so cataclysmic and unprecedented could shake up the patterns of history. But I haven't seen it yet in over 160 years, and I don't expect to see it this time.
What an intro, Dad. Thank you for that. We apologize for his internet lagging a little bit. Are you ready to get to questions, or do you have more to say, Dad?
I always have more to say, but I love our audience, and I'm always ready for questions. How many viewers do we have?
6,500.
6,500?
Yes.
That's nice.
You're nice.
Yes, that's a record, right?
No, I think we had 8,000 last time.
Oh, well then, come on, get on, break that record.
All right.
Keep the donations and memberships coming. That keeps us on the air. I don't take a penny of it.
All right. Eric Karstensen says, hey, Alan, I'm Very angry, particularly at Barack Obama for not sticking by the man he picked to be his VP. I have lost a lot of respect for him. Biden deserves a better friend. What do you think?
I agree entirely. I admired Barack Obama as a president, but I was highly critical of him for being another spineless Democrat and not building the Democratic Party. Yes, he won re-election, but during his years, the Democratic Party collapsed. Huge losses in the midterm elections of 2010 and 2014, not only in the House and the Senate, but also governorships and state legislative elections, which enabled the Republicans to gerrymander many of the key swing states like Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Moreover, in 2016, he knew all about the Russian interference with the election, and he should have come out with an Oval Office address and told the nation about it. Instead of being a spineless Democrat, he thought he had to get Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate leader's permission. And what do you think Mitch McConnell told him, Sam?
He told him, bah humbug.
Yes. What were the chances he would get Mitch McConnell's permission?
I guess 0.
Essentially 0. So I admire Biden as Obama as president. I thought the Affordable Care Act was the most important piece of social legislation of our time, as well as the stimulus bill and other initiatives. But he really exemplified the spineless Democrats and the inability of the Democrats to build their party during the Obama years.
Member Captain M90 says, do you think Biden will likely resign and hand it over to Kamala early to preserve the incumbency key?
Well, that would be a smart thing to do, but he should have done it right away if he was going to do it. It might look rather strange. I still think he should do it. But look, I'm not an insider. And the fact that I'm not an insider means I can analyze elections through the keys impartially and objectively. You're going to hear all kinds of spin, from Democratic, Republican strategists, from so-called experts like James Carville, disregarded all. Look to history and to the keys for an impartial and objective analysis, but I have no inside knowledge about what Biden may or may not do. My gut tells me he's not going to hand over the presidency, but that's just my gut.
Member Kyle Fishman says, you said the foreign policy failure key leans false, but they haven't lost the wars yet. I'm guessing he means in Israel and Ukraine. Does stalemate equal failure?
Well, we'll see. The devil is always in the details, but right now things are not going well in Gaza. A tremendous humanitarian crisis. And you have this awful PM Netanyahu in Israel who has made Israel, which should be a model for the world, a pariah in the world, just like Donald Trump did for America when he was president. So, and the war in Ukraine is not at the moment going really well. So I haven't called the key yet, but I would say it leans against, whereas I think the third party and social unrest key leans the other way, but I haven't made calls in any of these yet.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't know if you said this, but you haven't made a call yet. So I think a lot of people have been saying online that you picked Biden, et cetera, you picked the Democrats, but you haven't made an official prediction yet.
I have made it very clear. I've not made a final prediction. I would do so only after the Democratic convention, but I have said with only 2 keys down that a lot would have to go wrong for Biden to lose. It's not quite as positive for Harris, assuming she's the consensus nominee. Still, a lot would have to go wrong, although not as much. And if she's not the Democratic consensus nominee, then, not a whole lot would have to go wrong for the Democrats to lose.
Member Mike DeNicola says, hey, Alan, do you think Harris will quickly gain enough support to keep at least the no primary contest key?
I think so, but I'm not positive. I'm, really reluctant to presume that the Democrats grow a spine and do the right thing. The spectacle of the Democrats out there in public trashing their incumbent president doesn't give me a whole lot of hope, but it would be insanity for the Democrats to have a big party fight now, recreate the conditions of 2016 and conditions which over 120 years have always spelled defeat for the White House party.
I still think after today's news, I still think it's kind of nuts that the Democrats just threw their incumbent out the window. I mean, I know he's old. I know there were issues, but it's like incumbency is the most powerful thing in politics, and they just were like, "Fuck it."
Yeah, it's a crisis. It's a crisis of their own making, but with a consensus behind Harris, it's still a crisis that is well salvageable for the Democratic Party. I hope they're all listening and understand that and do what's right for themselves this time and unite behind Harris. The alternative could be doomed for the Democrats and 4 more years of Donald Trump.
Is there any validity? I've seen some people on the left fringe on the or I guess I was thinking about Andrew Yang too. Andrew Yang, I've seen Jenks say this. They want a primary fight. They want, because there's no primary that's going to happen, they want there to be a tussle and for somebody who is quote unquote the best candidate to end up on top. What would you say about that?
That is astounding ignorance of history. Not only does it go against the 40-year record of the keys to the White House, but it creates a situation under which the incumbent party always loses. They have to understand that. And by the way, the Democrats have been horrible in picking so-called electable candidates. You've heard this before. What's the one word I would eliminate from the English language?
Electability.
Electability. So the Democrats thought, they had nominated over the last several decades eminently electable candidates. Walter Mondale, former vice president. John Kerry, the great senator from Massachusetts. Mike Dukakis, the great governor of Massachusetts. Hillary Clinton, former first lady, U.S. senator, secretary of state. And what do all of these candidates have in common, Sam?
Losers.
They all lost. It was kind of the unpredictable, off-the-wall candidates who, for the most part, have won for the Democrats. Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama. So this idea that somehow, if there's a big party fight, the Democrats will choose the quote-unquote electable candidate is nonsense. Moreover, the identity of the Democratic candidate has little or nothing to do with the outcome of the election, but an internal party fight has a great deal to do with the outcome of the election.
Super chat from Still Alive. They say, can Alan tell us which presidential races were won with just the contest key without the incumbency key? Sure hope Pelosi, etc. all endorse Harris soon.
I gave a couple of examples and I'll repeat them. 1928, Herbert Hoover was not the incumbent, but was uncontested and won. 1988, George H.W. Bush was not the incumbent and won, and neither one of those elections were close. Herbert Hoover won in an overwhelming landslide with about 58% of the vote, and Bush won by a near landslide by about 7 to 8 points.
Wow, we just got a $100 donation from Ryan Klinkerman. They say, hi, Alan. As a 21-year-old voter myself, I always wondered how effective we will be as a voter base going into the future, especially as being known as a more progressive base. Do you see changes as time goes on? And as a baby boomer, aka an old man, has that voter base become a smaller demographic?
Wow. The younger voter base has always had a problem, not with their political views, but with what, Sam? What was the problem? Still is with younger voters.
They don't vote.
They don't vote. That's the thing. If you want your views to be represented in your government, you've got to vote. And even more than that, you've got to organize and get involved in politics, even outside the context of electoral politics. Nobody thought, we would get all the great civil rights initiatives and the women's rights initiatives of the 60s and 70s, but it was people getting out on the street, protesting, putting their bodies on the line, being injured and killed, that led to fundamental social change.
Our member and our great mod, Jeff Cruson, says, the incumbency key is absolutely binary. Either you're the incumbent or not. That being said, the contest key is less clear at this present moment. Is it correct that it's not 100% guaranteed that Harris will be the uncontested nominee if Biden steps down? We won't know for sure until the delegates actually vote.
Absolutely right. It's not 100% guaranteed. She's got to garner at least 2/3 of the vote according to the definition of the keys, which you can find in my latest book, Predicting the Next President, The Keys to the White House 2024. I think she's going to achieve that, but you're absolutely right. It's not guaranteed until the delegates vote. As the great Yogi Berra once said, it ain't over till it's over.
There was a report that Manchin may throw his hat into the ring. What if Kamala still gets, let's say, 2/3 of the delegate votes? Does she still hold the contest key?
Manchin has been a thorn in the side of Democrats for a very long time. And he's threatened to do all kinds of things, leave the party, become a Republican. He threatened to run as an independent, and he's always reneged. I do not believe Manchin is going to mount a serious campaign for the Democratic nomination. And if he does, I can't imagine that he would get more than minimal token support in the party, particularly since he's leaving the Senate and no longer has any leverage.
I'm noticing a lot of trolls in the chat today. Hi, trolls. Canadian Citizen asks, Democrats had a choice between this, or this is more of a statement. Democrats had a choice between the simpler path to victory and the complicated path. They chose the latter. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The simplest path was to preserve both the incumbency and the contest key. And I outlined my plan A and plan B for that. They didn't do that, so they lose the incumbency key. And we don't know for certain that they're going to salvage the contest key. Recent Democratic behavior does not lead you to be incredibly optimistic, but I do think the Democrats will finally see the light and unite behind Harris, but that's not a lock, stock guarantee.
I just want to shout out our social medias. You can follow Alan on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Alan Lichtman. You can follow my YouTube and my Instagram at Sammy Licht, SammyLicht. We have a question from Vincent.
Before that, have we hit 8,000 views yet?
Yes.
All right. That's great. And keep those memberships and donations coming. We've gone out of our way to do a special outside of our regular. Keep us on the air. Is that what we are, Sam, on the air?
I think we just hit 9,000, actually, viewers.
Awesome.
Vincent Escalano says, if Kamala holds enough keys to win, do you see her path to 270 running through different states than Biden's path at 270 would have? I'm worried about older white states like Wisconsin flipping red.
I see her following a very similar path. Interestingly, after all the battering of Biden by his own party, after the Republican convention and, the miracle in Pennsylvania, as Trump calls it, this poll came out today and had Wisconsin as a dead heat. And this is after, and usually you get a bump in the convention, much less the Democrats eating their own and the assassination attempt. Wisconsin hasn't moved.
I'm not sure what this person's name is. Looks like B. Nix. I'm not sure. They say Professor.
Yeah,
they donated.
Oh, nice.
Awesome. They say, Professor Lichtman, if Biden decides, say, a week before his term is over to resign and make Kamala the POTUS, do they hold on to the incumbency key?
I don't answer hypotheticals like that. That would be a very difficult call, and I'm not going to answer it as a hypothetical.
What if it's one day? What if the day before the convention he's like, you know what, Kamala, or a day before the election, he's like, Kamala's the president. Is that the incumbency key?
Well, probably not, because probably, a third of the American people or more have already voted by mail and in early voting.
Fair point. Shannon Starr says, how much convention controversy unturns the contest key?
The winner has to garner at least 2/3 or more and be nominated on the first ballot.
There you go. Thank you, Sharon.
It's in my book. Read my book, Predicting the Next President, 2024, on Amazon.
All right. The new edition is available to order on Amazon. Our good friend President Belichick, one of our many presidents in the chat, says,
one of our many, maybe he'll run, or she will run.
Yeah. They say, how effective can Biden govern as a lame duck? Will it be harder to get a ceasefire in Gaza or assist in Ukraine? Could RFK Jr. get a boost in the polls?
Two different questions. There are two schools of thought about governing as a lame duck. On one hand, you don't have the same kind of leverage because you're not going to have a second term and no one has to worry about that. On the other hand, you don't have to worry about re-election, so you have a completely free hand to operate as president. And with regard to the second question, we won't know for some time how events affect the candidacy of RFK Jr. They could go either way.
Thank you to our friend Evan Budemeyer for being a member and for a donation. I think we answered that question about Manchin. Patrick Murray says, Sam, are you going live after this? I don't believe so. But you can always follow me at Sammy Licht on YouTube.
I got to make an announcement.
What?
Sam Lichtman, your producer and host, completed his first triathlon today.
Yeah.
Swim, bike, and run. He did it.
Yeah, I'm a little
Karen,
tired.
His wonderful mom and his dad are very proud of him.
Thank you. Yeah, that's probably the main reason why I'm not going to go live. I'm a little tired, and but I will be going live plenty. So if you want to follow me there, you can.
We have another one coming up on Tuesday.
Dejeen Dareen says, we had a good run, I guess in reference to Biden. You quantify the contest key with the result of the primaries. How will you quantify it this time? You just answered that.
I just answered that. 2/3 of the delegates for the winner.
Thank you. Thank you, Jasper. I believe we answered that as well. Keep Dreamin' says, can you explain key 2 in lame terms, please? And thank you.
The contest key? I think I just
did. Yes, I think we've answered a bunch of these questions already.
The winner needs 2/3 of the delegates at the convention, since there's no primary and a first ballot nomination.
Grant S. says, do you think we'll ever get back to a point where the parties aren't so far apart? I believe in one election cycle, we went from Romney to Trump.
Yeah, that is quite a change. I think so. American politics ebbs and flows. It follows cycles. We've had periods before of extreme polarization, obviously, the 1850s or the 1930s, and it can be overcome, but it's very difficult this time because there are no mainstream Republicans anymore. The mainstream of the Republican Party is Trumpism, and I'm not sure how a change in that would be engineered.
Taryn B says, why don't people listen to you more? You have an established track record of predicting elections while others have none / hide behind percentages.
Yeah, it's very difficult to understand why listeners give any credence to these pundits and pollsters and operatives who have no track record whatsoever and who predict off the top of their heads and are often wrong. A prime example is James Carville, who did one great thing over 30 years ago, helping Clinton get elected, and since then has been a horrible predictor. He predicted John Kerry in 2004. He predicted Hillary Clinton in 2016. He predicted Trump would dodge the first debate, and most egregiously, He wrote a whole book in 2009, way off base, saying Democrats would totally dominate American politics for the next 40 years. And yet the media treats him as though he were a prediction guru, when his predictions are no better than reading tea leaves or consulting the entrails of goats.
What did you say at the end there? Or solving what?
That's it.
Uh-oh. What did you say at the end there?
I said his predictions are no better than reading tea leaves or consulting the entrails of goats.
Gotcha.
Long ago ways of making predictions.
Thank you for Meta What. I think we answered that question. A funny chat from RDS. They say Trump defeated Biden like he runs his business, under budget and ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
NTR Prizing says, I'm losing hope, man. The signs are looking bad. What would you say to this guy, Dad? He's losing hope.
It's not. It may not be quite as bright as it has been, but if the Democrats grow a spine and a brain and unite behind Harris, they're still only down 3 keys, and 3 of the remaining 4 keys would have to fall. And incumbents have won. Incumbent parties have won in open seats so long as there is no big contest. It's a small sample, but it certainly holds out a lot of hope.
Darren Brown says, I listened to your interviews in 2016 and heard you say Gary Johnson was polling more than 5% to turn the third party key that year. Could you explain why 5% and not 10%?
It was 10%. I'm not sure what interview you were talking about. It's retrospectively, it's 5%, but to predict, I don't know what the final result is. So I have a rule of halves because of the wasted vote syndrome, and it's got to be at 10%.
Gotcha. Derek Baker says, if support for Kamala within the party is 100%, could that negate concerns rerun of the failure keys? If not, then what must the Dems do?
It has nothing to do with the failure key. It has everything to do with the contest key. Failure and success key are separate. And turn, I think, on Gaza and Ukraine. The best thing that Biden can do to secure at least one of those keys would be to broker a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. Perhaps now that he doesn't have to worry about re-election, he might be able to focus more on achieving that goal.
Right. Matt Davidson wants to know, can keys change last minute? For example, late October, if something crazy happens like Biden dies or resigns, or a peace deal in Gaza.
I got it. Of course, that's possible, but it's only happened once since 1860, and that was during the Civil War, when big Union victories in September and October turned around a number of keys. But this notion of an October surprise, it's only happened once in 160 plus years. It's a great myth, which is why I think I've made all my predictions before October, some of them years in advance, including predicting the very hard to call 2012 election in 2010. Then out of the blue, I get this 30-page attack from Nate Silver, who has no academic credentials, saying, you can't predict this early. And my answer was, you can't, because you're just a clerk who compiles polls, but I can because my system taps into the structure of how elections really works. Ultimately, years later, he came around to my point of view. I wrote him a very sweet email saying, let's do a joint article on how 2 different forecasts ultimately came to the same view. You know what I heard from him, Sam?
Crickets.
Nothing. Nate Silver is not my favorite person. Very even declined. Very rude of him.
Not everybody write that down. Not my dad's favorite person, Nate Silver. Kathy Vessels say, "Can we?"
Now Nate Silver has been bounced from 538 and is being financed by the far right-wing billionaire Thiel. Is that right, Sam?
I don't have specific research on that. That's what I've heard, but I can't confirm nor deny.
All right, but at least some have claimed that.
Some have claimed that.
We can't verify it one way or the other.
Maybe you can. I haven't personally.
I haven't either. Maybe our audience knows better. They often do.
Kathy Vessels say, can Republicans force Biden back in legally? I've heard talk about that. If so, would it be a scandal, and would we get the incumbency key back? Could Biden still win?
They can't do that. This is another example of Republican obstructionism. Just like they filed all of these lawsuits trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And there were 60 of them, and they lost them all except one very minor lawsuit. They lost them in front of Democratic appointed judges, Republican appointed judges, Trump appointed judges. This is another obstructionist tactic designed to interfere with the democratic process. Biden is not the nominee, right, Sam? He's the presumptive nominee. Democrats have every right to change who the nominee is going to be. In the early days, sometimes parties went tens of ballots before they picked a nominee at the convention. So these lawsuits are just obstruction. They're frivolous. They're designed to, gum up the system. They're not going to work.
Right. For Meto What wants to know, do you feel that the Supreme Court could interfere with the election results in November?
I mean, it's always possible, but if we go with what happened in 2020, Supreme Court steered very clear of getting involved and interfering with election results. They did not take any of the lawsuits that those trying to overturn the election brought to the Supreme Court. So if they follow that precedent, the answer is no. But who knows? The Supreme Court has been very, very activist in imposing its views.
Is it Dudley Murdoch with a question? They say, is it extremely unlikely the NIH, CDC, HHS, and FDA will be shut down, dismantled, and terminated and abandoned in coming decades or centuries even if Republicans are in power?
I think that's very possible if Republicans are in power. All federal regulatory agencies have been substantially weakened by a recent Supreme Court decision this year that overturned the so-called Severin doctrine, giving the experts in these administrative agencies considerable authority to carry out the will of Congress. That's been overturned. Now, basically, Congress, who has no expertise specifically in, aviation or medicine or communications or power or the environment, has to spell out in great detail what these agencies are authorized to do. Otherwise, the courts can overturn their decisions, just as the Republicans have tried to get the courts to overturn the FDA's decision on the availability of mifepristone, the abortion pill. And we have federal judges becoming doctors, trying to weigh in on decisions that the experts at the FDA have already made. And it's a sorry spectacle, let me tell you.
Andrew Carlson, they say, Professor, you emphasized party building's crucial role in a president's success. Have you considered writing a detailed blueprint on this, or is this somewhere you've already outlined the steps?
I haven't outlined the exact steps, but I've written about it in a number of my books. But that's not a bad, I have to say right now, I'm a little bit busy. Maybe at some point I'll get a little bit more leisure. What do you think, Sam?
Maybe, yeah. He's a busy guy right now, folks. Got it. That's the truth. Renan Diaz-Reño says, why do we even need Biden for just a few months as president? Shouldn't he just resign and let Kamala be the president already?
That's what I had recommended. That was my plan B. But I don't control what Biden does. And at least what the Democrats seem to be heading towards a consensus nominee is much better than what the Democrats seemed to be heading for when they were trashing Biden over those many weeks, both the loss of incumbency and the contest key, which would have been very detrimental to the Democrats.
Alexander
How many viewers?
9,048.
Is that a record?
Yes.
We want to hit 10,000.
Yes, we do.
Join.
Alexander Shamilton says, do you think this changes things for RFK Jr.?
Who knows? RFK Jr. is such an idiosyncratic candidate. You know, I don't have inside information, but it's reported that he was in contact with Donald Trump trying to get him to help the Trump candidacy and undermine Biden. You know, I can't verify that, but he's such an off-the-wall candidate that there's no way of knowing. Frankly, if his name was Robert F. Lichtman instead of Robert F. Kennedy, his support would be cut in half, or maybe double to triple with that name. But a lot of it is drawing on the Kennedy name.
Right.
A good deal of his support.
Let's see here. Eileen Kane, we are trying to get his books on audio version, so don't you worry.
We're trying. I don't control that, but we're trying.
I just want to let people know we've got a lot of questions, and we're at 40 minutes. So if you make a donation right now, can't guarantee that we're going to get to your question tonight. Just want to put that out there.
I'm willing to go a little overtime to get as many questions as we can, although I've been working all day.
Yeah, I don't want to overwork you.
I'm tough.
Bilal Nadeem says, is this a disaster for Democrats? Did they just guarantee their defeat?
Absolutely not. As I explained, they might have, or might yet, if they have a big party brawl, but as long as they preserve the contest key, they're still in a good position to win. Although, obviously, I've not made a final prediction because there are a number of uncertain keys. So take heart if you're a Democrat.
Right.
If you're a Republican, this does not guarantee you're going to win.
Alex Rojas says, hard to imagine. I just lost my place. Hold on. Hard to imagine this issue with age and senior Dems booting Biden wouldn't change the scandal key.
Nothing to do with the scandal key. Scandal key involves corruption, like in Watergate or Teapot Dome or the Trump scandals. And there has to be bipartisan recognition of scandal. So what's going on here does not fit the definition of the key. If you want to develop your own prediction system, I encourage it. I welcome it. But if you're going to use my system, you've got to stick with the definitions that are integral to the system, and you've got to stick with the way each key has been answered from 1860 to 2020.
Right. Elemental Bot wants to know, can someone reject the party nomination, like if for some reason the DNC still nominated Biden?
Of course. Absolutely. It's a free country. You can't be forced to accept a nomination. It wasn't after a nomination, but there's the famous Sherman Declaration by General Sherman, the great hero of the Civil War. He said, if nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve.
Let's see here. Member Joshua D says, how do you think I can get involved that will actually make a difference considering I'm in a blue state where my vote doesn't matter?
Maybe you should answer that, Sam. You're the communications guy.
Yeah, but this is about political activism.
Well, political activism is worthwhile even in a blue state. We now have a competitive Senate election between former Governor Hogan and County Exec also Brooks. And that election could affect the composition of the Senate, critically affect appointments to the federal democracy, judicial appointments. So don't assume advocacy is irrelevant even in a so-called blue state.
I think.
Plus, you can be active elsewhere. We're in the age of social media, Sam, right? So borders don't as much as they once did, do they?
I'm not gonna lie to you. You are breaking up hardcore. I don't know what you said. Not good.
I said we're in the social media age, so state borders do not mean as much as they once did.
Right. You're not wrong. 1 second, please. I lost my place. One of our other mods.
Going anywhere.
One of our other mods, Sean P, says, I saw your short where you said you spoke to Ron Klain, who said Biden was staying in. I guess he got bad intel. Does he still have Biden's ear? Can you talk to him about Biden's recognition and how could this happen and how it could help Harris win? Or do you think Biden already knows about the keys and is refusing to step down?
I already know about the keys. The second part of that was, here's to the keys, which do not depend upon the fickle pulse. They know all about the keys. And I guess Biden's mind changed. That happens. But they are very much aware of the keys, which is why Biden has so strongly endorsed Harris in order to avoid losing the contest key. They're well on top of that.
Yeah, that our announcement did not age very well.
No, that's the way it is in politics. The great British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, a Jewish guy, once said, "Finality is not a word we use in politics."
Yeah, I mean, it was really, you asked the guy a question, he answered, and we reported on it, and that's all we could do,
Nothing else we could do. And maybe at the time, Biden was still convinced he was going to stay in. We don't know when he made that decision, and we may never know.
Okay. Yeah. Let me find my place again. Sharon Starr says, Axios reports that Nate Silver joined Polymarket as an advisor, which is a prediction market. Peter Thiel and Ethereum founder Vikal Buterin raised $70 million for it. So I guess that's our reporting on Nate Silver. Yeah,
that seems to confirm what we heard, but we can't independently confirm it. Investigative journalists.
Walpole and Worcester, I guess they're from Massachusetts, says, what if Harris picks Buttigieg as her VP pick? How would that tie into the keys? I strongly think it will happen.
I have no idea who she's going to pick. I'd be very surprised if she picked a federal bureaucrat, but the vice presidency has no effect on the keys. There is no vice presidential keys. And it's often very difficult to predict a vice presidential pick on a ticket because it's so personal. But I would be very surprised if she picked Buttigieg. I think more likely she'd reach for a governor, since she herself, is a federal official, as senator and vice president. There are some very strong governors to pick from. Andy Beshear, who won big in a red state of Kentucky, Roy Cooper, who won in the swing state of North Carolina. And there's a lot of talk about Senator Mark Kelly, outside of the governors of Arizona, in a critical state, a former astronaut, a moderate. So there are excellent picks. She may pick someone with a thought, but I don't think it's going to be Buttigieg. What do you think, Sam?
No, I don't think so either. Give me 1 second. All right, let's get back into it.
Why not? I'm still going strong.
Vahan Zu. How do you think you say this name? Bznuni. Zuni
Zuni.
says, wouldn't Dems avoiding a contest be undemocratic?
Of course, it's not undemocratic. It's still the vote of the delegates. It's just a matter of 2/3 of the delegates uniting behind a candidate. They still have to vote. It's still a democratic process.
Tony Quintanilla says, must the Democrats nominate Harris before the convention by October 7th to avoid legal problems in Ohio?
Yeah, we talked about that. I think I'm not a lawyer, but I think the legal problems will get resolved. And there is a lot of talk about the Democrats doing a virtual nomination before the convention to sew up. That's not the way they would put it, but I would put it to sew up the contest key and then avoid any further issues about ballot access down the road.
Vincent So says, Professor Lichtman, what can citizens do to improve the chances of Kamala getting the consensus and the contest key? Write to members of Congress and DNC leaders, ?
Absolutely. Contact anyone who you think has any influence within the Democratic Party. If enough of you do that, they do listen to the American people to some extent.
Alex Kawa says, congrats on 50K subs. I guess we just hit 50K. With so many Dems, including potential candidates uniting behind Biden, what do you think is the % chance that contest key is salvaged?
I think it's a very good chance that they'll sew down the contest key. If not, I will say Democrats not only don't have a spine, but they don't have a brain.
One second. Travis Olander says the incumbency key is not a benefit if the sitting president's record is unpopular. Lack of action on abortion, inflation, and SCOTUS, period.
That's just wrong. You can't assess whether the incumbency key works or not based upon your subjective assessment of the presidency. That critically turns on your values. Obviously, liberals, conservatives, moderates all have very different senses of the presidency. So you can't turn the key on those kind of personal subjective judgments.
Right. Amanda L. says, write letters to voters in swing states. Vote forward, vote forward. Cameron,
get involved. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, doesn't matter. Get involved to get your values expressed in our government. We are a republic, but we are a democratic republic.
Cameron Keir says Democrats will have a nominee that didn't receive a single primary vote. That's the real attack on democracy, not January 6th.
That's nowhere near an attack on democracy. The candidate who received the primary vote is no longer a candidate for president. Therefore, we are rejiggering the selection, and it is up to the delegates who are, in fact, elected in democratic primary processes. That has nothing to do with an attack on our democracy, which couldn't be more different.
Charles P. says, how would the key still be applicable when the candidate is not responsible for their outcomes?
It's not the candidate. You got to understand the keys. The keys are measured against the record of the incumbent party, not the characteristics of the candidate. That's why when George H.W. Bush fell behind by 17 points in May of 1988, and every pundit wrote him off saying what a terrible candidate he was. Democrats said if we couldn't beat Bush, we might as well leave the country. But I wrote, not only would Bush win, but he was a shoo-in to win because he was running on the record of the incumbent Reagan administration, the second term, peace, prosperity, domestic tranquility, foreign accomplishments. So it doesn't matter whether it's the sitting president who is the candidate or another candidate, you're still running on the record of the incumbent administration, according to the keys. Again, you want to develop a candidate-centered system, go right ahead. I welcome it. But if you're going to use the keys, you got to stick to the definition of the keys.
Kara Lynn says, are you concerned about low Democratic voter turnout based on all that has happened and the divide in the Democratic Party?
No way to predict turnout. Turnout ebbs and flows and doesn't affect the keys one way or the other. You cannot predict elections based on turnout because you have no idea what the turnout is going to be. That's one of the fallacies of the polls. Telling you who's going to lose before anyone has actually voted, and they have no idea who the actual is going to be.
We didn't get that last part from you, Dad. Can you try to repeat that?
Yeah, that's one of the fallacies of the polls. They tell you who's ahead and who's behind, but in fact, no one's actually voted yet. And they have no idea who the actual voters are going to be. So they have to guess at that. And every pollster has a different way of guessing.
The Orange Pill Nurse says, I think there was an underlying effort to get Biden and Harris off the ticket from Pelosi and them. I think at this time the public blowback would hurt them because the media loves Kamala for now, so they won't be up front for now. I'm
sure I understand the question.
It was more of a statement. It was more of a statement. Don't worry.
Well, this inside baseball has nothing to do with the keys. If she is the consensus nominee, the Democrats win the contest key, period.
Right. You said insider baseball has nothing to do with the keys. Gotcha. Colin Laverne says, big fan. Would you consider Trump being shot social unrest / Afghanistan a military disaster?
Trump being shot is not social unrest. It's not something that calls into question the stability of the society. What was the second part? I know there was a second part, which I don't remember.
Afghanistan, was it a military disaster?
We've answered that many times.
Yes. The answer is no. Is key 6 in Harris's favor?
Key 6. Is that the policy change? Absolutely. That's already locked in for the Democrats. Remember, it's not measured against the candidate. It's measured against the incumbent administration. I can't stress that too many times. And clearly, the Biden administration has made fundamental changes from the policies of the Trump administration. One of the biggest things is the Trump administration dropping out of the Iran nuclear deal, dropping out of the climate deal. And I just read, I don't know how reliable it is, that Iran is now very close because of the reneging on the nuclear deal to developing a nuclear weapon, which would be a tragedy for the Middle East.
Andrew Aguilar says, did Al Gore maintain the contest or incumbency keys in the 2000 race?
Did not maintain the incumbency key, did maintain the contest key.
Right. He was not the sitting president. Let's see here. Ace wants to know if you ever fear that the keys won't work or will break.
As I said, every 4 years, I said the keys will break. For example, first time Obama ran, they said the keys would break because we're not ready for an African-American president. But I always stick to the keys. I don't change them on the fly. But I'm not so arrogant to say it's impossible that there could be some cataclysmic, unprecedented events that shake things up outside the 160 years pattern of history. But so far, the keys are by far the most successful prediction system we have. No other system comes close to a 40-year record.
Joshua Perlstein says, Alan, is there any merit to the argument that Kamala could still win despite 6+ keys turned based on the nature of how unpopular Trump is?
I guess anything is possible, but I think not. I stick to the keys, and I explain, how robust the keys are and how every 4 years someone forces me to change them. I don't, and the keys turn out to be right. So I don't see that happening. Although, again, it's not impossible.
Demigod Max says, Buttigieg and Newsom just endorsed Harris. The number of potential serious challengers to Harris appears to be shrinking rapidly.
Yes, I do think that the Democrats will unite around Harris.
If Biden resigns and Kamala becomes president, as you recommend, the next in line for VP is the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Would you say that scenario would hurt their chances of winning even more?
Probably, the keys are the keys, so I don't go outside the keys. And that is a troubling situation. Of course, under the 25th Amendment, she gets to appoint a VP with the approval of a simple majority of the House and the Senate, and some say the Republican House would never approve one of her nominees. I'm not sure that's true. It would only take a few Republicans to switch over to approve, and if they don't, that would just verify the narrative that's very negative for Republicans of obstructionists who have no positive agenda.
Austin Gutierrez says, who would you recommend to be Harris's vice president?
I think I mentioned a number of possible choices: Kelly, Bashir, Whitmer, and Cooper. But I have nothing to do with that.
Right. And it doesn't affect the keys, as you mentioned.
No.
Jesse
There's no vice presidential key. I just think those would be good choices.
Jesse Wang says, how does Kamala lose the incumbency key? You previously said she wouldn't because she's the incumbent VP. What has changed? You said Truman still satisfied the incumbency key.
Because he was president when Roosevelt died. Therefore, he was the incumbent president. Just because she's the VP does not make her an incumbent, just as George H.W. Bush, the VP in 1988, was not the incumbent and did not win the incumbency key. It's very clear. It's got to be the sitting president, not a vice president.
President Scrooge says, would a ceasefire deal flip the foreign policy success key?
It could. As you know, I don't like answering hypotheticals, and the devil is always in the details and how it's received, but it certainly has that potential and is the most likely thing that could flip the success key in favor of the Democrats.
Right. I just want to say, I want to thank everybody for their donations. If we're not getting to your question, it's probably because we already answered it. Like in the case of Silly Dog Farms. Fiercely Independent says, what impact will Libertarian Party nominee Chase Oliver have in the 2024 presidential election, specifically in Georgia?
I mean, I can't speak to Georgia, but in terms of the keys, none.
Nowhere Man says, did the incumbency key work for Gerald Ford? Remember whip inflation now?
That's, again, you can't confuse different things. Yes, Gerald Ford was the incumbent, even though he was the most accidental of presidents. He was a member of Congress, appointed vice president when Spiro Agnew resigned after being indicted for bribery, and then became president when Richard Nixon resigned. Yes, he won the incumbency key, but some of these other problems that you mentioned with his presidency cost him other keys, but you don't merge the keys.
Miles Wolf asks, why was Truman able to stay in despite doubts?
Because he won the keys. This is a prime example of the keys going against the pollsters. Truman lost every single poll in 1948. There was a survey of 40 of the nation's leading pundits, and how many of them thought Truman would win, Sam?
None.
None. And yet the key showed Truman would win. Not only did he win, it wasn't close. He won by 5 points, and he brought back with him a Democratic House and Senate that the Democrats had lost in the midterms of 1946. So 48 is a vindication of the keys and a rejection of making predictions solely based on the polls.
Ezra Kirkpatrick says, Biden must resign to save this democracy. Do you agree? Not necessarily, right?
I think I answered that,
Yeah.
that even without his resigning, if they retain the contest key, they're still in a decent position to win.
Right. Let me see. I'm trying to see if any of these, a lot of these are repeats. You've argued in the past that this.
I think we're winding down too, aren't we?
Yes. You want to wind down?
Give it another, 3 or 4 questions. God, I got 10 messages from someone. Someone must really want my attention, Sam.
I guess so. Here's a good one from Jackson Brumfield. They say, could you explain what exactly is considered an internal party contest? Were Taft and Hoover not open contests following a Republican presidency?
It's not whether it's an open contest, it's either delegate votes back then or primary votes that decided, and I think I've said this now 6 times, if the nominee gets 2/3 or more, it's not considered a serious contest. It's not just any contest. Again, you've got to stick to the definition of the keys.
All right. Well, let's do one more question. I'm going to do one more question, non-member, non-donation. So I'm going to look at the chat. If you're not a member and you didn't donate, I'm going to pick a question that comes into the chat. So let's see here. How many times did a sitting president not seek re-election? Did incumbent party win the election on those instances?
Let me think. Usually the incumbent party loses when a sitting president does not seek re-election, but in those examples like 52, 68, was also an internal party.
All right. With that, your connection's getting pretty bad.
Oh, and another example, one more example, where there wasn't an internal party contest. An incumbent president didn't seek re-election, and his party still won, is 1928. When Calvin Coolidge didn't seek re-election, Herbert Hoover didn't win the incumbency key, but the party contest key held, and in that case, the incumbent nominee won.
Final question from our good friend Dr. Ash. They say, can Republican donors funnel money to potential Dem candidates to drive the contest key false? For example, Joe Manchin might be in the running. Could he just be one plant to divide Dems further?
They might try that. I don't think it's going to work, but they can donate to anyone they want. Such thing as public donations or Democrat donations. Anyone can within
We're not hearing a word you're saying, Dad. With that, let's wrap it up. Let's hopefully we can get you back for your final word. This is a big day, a historic day. He's still frozen. Okay, there he is. What's your final words to the people watching, Dad?
I have some significant final words. I thought the Democrats, were shamelessly trashing the incumbent president right out in public, and that if Biden stayed in, they'd tick off incumbency and contest. I had a plan B. If Biden steps down, he should resign the presidency, Harris become president, tick off those two keys. And they kind of split like B. That is, Biden stepped down but did not resign. It looks like they are going to avert the loss of the contest key by uniting behind Harris.
All right, we only got some of that. I would just say to everybody out there watching, keep calm. There's still a long way to go. There's still a lot to happen. I know today was a dramatic day, but there's still a long way to go,
Do you
right?
want me to repeat my final statement?
No,
Do you want me to repeat my final statement?
All right, try it one more time. I'll cut you off if it's gobbledygook.
You know, I've been criticizing the spineless Democrats for trashing their incumbent president and elect presumptive nominee right out in public. And I did have a plan B, which is if Biden is forced out, he should resign the presidency, let Harris tick off the incumbency key and the contest key. So they kind of split the difference of my plan B. Biden did not resign, so they lose the incumbency key, but it looks like they're going to unite behind Harris and retain the contest key.
And
Did you get that?
Yes, and with that, we say good night.
Good night, all. See you Tuesday.